Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mr. Willett here again. So on last episode, we talked about the USS Maine. We talked about the factors, kind of the tightening of tensions. More specifically, the sparks that kind of led to that giant fire, that giant bonfire that is the Spanish-American War. So today we're actually going to conclude the Spanish-American War in under 15 minutes. So without further ado, let's get started. So last time we talked about the USS Maine. What was the USS Maine? Well, think about it. Remember, we're making these big ships because why? Alfred T. Mann, remember? Alfred T. Mann, he kind of was this guy who really was pushing the thought of making the United States a naval might. And because of that, the United States started making more and more ships. So the USS Maine was one of them, very big ship. And McKinley had the USS Maine going over after the Delone letter, which basically communicated that Spain did not like us. So he's sending a ship over there to get some troops, get some people who are situated in the Havana Harbor, and kind of bring them home. When, boom, remember the explosion? And I believe 260 sailors died. Now, what do you think the public's going to do about this? Right? They're going to be like, oh my gosh, an accident. No, they're gonna outrage, right? No, we're gonna outrage. It was destroyed, caused by a bomb or a torpedo or something. We don't know. We're just gonna assume it was Spain. Yeah, literally everyone assumes Spain did it. They point the fingers immediately. Yeah, that's Spain. Clearly Spain did that, without even trying really to find the evidence that we found the torpedo at the bottom of the ocean. It's clearly Spain. No, they didn't do that. So Spain immediately becomes an enemy. I remember we talked about those yellow journalists, kind of like the muckrakers, only now they're kind of taking stories and just kind of making them, highlighting them, making them bigger. So William Randolph Hearst, a yellow journalist, his quote is, "You furnish the pictures, you give me the pictures, and I'll furnish the war." Basically, if I get the pictures for it, I can make war happen. I can take a picture of the wreckage. I can take a picture of the burning ship. I can make a cartoon of the burning ship. I can furnish your war. I can, get the headlines that basically make Spain the bad guy. Fun fact about the Maine: later on, in the 1970s, there's actually research done which highly suggests that it was probably just a fire which caused a spark. Remember, gunpowder, clearly highly explosive, in the ammunition reserves of the ship, which exploded the ship because, it just kind of happened. But no, they don't care about that. They're not even going to investigate it. So that's kind of just a little historical side part, is that, theory is that it didn't actually happen with Spain, did not actually do it. But again, the evidence is not there. And so remember, we talk about how we express ourselves, how Americans express themselves, political cartoons. So I specifically look at the one on the left. What do you think that is? How do you think that portrays Spain? Right? There's blood on a knife and then blood on a tombstone that says Maine sailors murdered by Spain. Murdered. Basically, it says, Spain is definitely the bad guys here. They clearly did all of this. They were murdered, and we need to avenge them. Kind of, it signifies the significance of this. Remember, we talked about description, purpose, significance. The significance of this political cartoon is that it's kind of getting people to jump on the bandwagon, if you will, to support the United States going to war. Remember, I'll furnish the war. Which comes up with this term, jingoism. What is jingoism? Not Jenga, jingoism. It's basically extreme nationalism. Don't know what nationalism is. It's basically the love for one's country, extreme patriotism. Like, we are America, we're going to rise above this. Right here, it says, "A spirit of war pervades the beast of all Americans." One of the main sayings at the time, and I can say this because it's historical, was, "To hell with Spain, remember the Maine." Remember the Maine. They're trying to use the Maine almost as a martyr. Martyr meaning kind of like someone who's died in the name of a better cause. For the American cause, for the American people. So because the Spain has gotten sunk, the Maine got sunk by Spain, it's a whole mixture. Maine, Spain, blame. It's just Anyway, um, we're going to use that as kind of our fuel towards war. So now the American people are all on board, right? I mean, think about it. If anything like this were to happen to the American people, we'd be upset. Right? Think about 9/11, very tragic um, event that occurred there, and it kind of fueled people into, yeah, we need to do something about it. And so we did. And so that's kind of, wars are always kind of, not always, but mostly incited by that one event that kind of sparks and goes in different directions, causing conflict. And so, right, so the conflict is now, it's going to happen. So remember, President McKinley didn't want war, really did not want war. And at this point, he has to. The American people are completely going for it. Spain at this point they've clearly voiced that they're not going to they're not really happy with the United States. If he doesn't declare a war, how do you think the people are going to feel, right? Do you think they're going to like McKinley? No, so his hand is kind of forced here. And so he goes and he asks Congress basically for an official declaration of war. And they enter war with Spain on April 21st, 1898. And clearly, because they're building American, the United States started moving their Navy ships into the area. And then on April 21st, the war officially began. So it doesn't start where we think it would start, right? You think it would start where? Cuba, right? I mean, clearly, this whole thing has been tension between Cuba. But no, actually, the United States goes all the way over to the Philippines, which is what the Spanish was holding. If you don't know where the Philippines is, basically in the South China Sea in East Asia, Southeast Asia, collection of islands. And so the United States goes there. They bring their, remember, military Navy might over there. Now the Philippines is kind of like Cuba in this respect. They're fighting for their independence, right? They are oppressed by Spain too, and they want to be free. So they joined forces with the United States, hoping that after the battle, they would have more freedom, more independence. That's not going to work out perfectly for them. What did I just do? It's not going to work out perfectly for them, though. And we'll see why. And it eventually will lead to tensions once we take over the Philippines. So you join the battle there. And the first real battle of the Spanish-American War is the Manila Bay. And it's the most decisive naval battle for the Americans during this war. I mean, the Commodore George Dewey basically comes in and just wrecks, completely destroys Spanish ships. It's a clear American victory, and the Americans are able to take over the Philippines very quickly. And here's an example, I guess, of an article from the time. Dewey smashes. So see, there it is again. Versus Dewey defeats Spanish fleet. It smashes Spanish fleet. Great naval battle between the squadron. I can't say it, Aesthetic Squadron and Spanish warships off Manila. So, just kind of spinning stories, yellow journalism. Now in Cuba, the front in Cuba, because remember, Spanish-American Wars kind of fought in the Philippine area and in the Cuban, Caribbean area. So the war in Cuba is furnished by these groups called the Rough Riders. Who are the Rough Riders? They're a group of kind of non-military, volunteer, if you will, trained civilian soldiers. And they consist of, I believe it also had 4 African-American regiments who were on, at the day, in Cuba, charging San Juan Hill. But basically, they're pretty relentless, the Rough Riders, went through just violent tactics. And they're led by Mr. Teddy Roosevelt himself, who we talked about in class. Eventually, his involvement with the Rough Riders and this kind of fighting in the war will kind of get his name in politics. Remember, we talked about the various roles he did to get them to where he was. And so he's kind of, even though he was definitely at the charge, he becomes a hero. Basically, everyone views him as a hero, and he is notified for that. So after all these things, right, the war only lasts a few months. It's all in 1898, and by December the war is basically over. Heck, by November the war is basically over. But really, we'll get to the why it ends during that time. But so basically, the end of the war is blockades. naval might, as we've been talking about. The Spanish fleet has no way to retaliate, and therefore the winner is us, the United States. Um, it's known as the Splendid Little War because there was only 4 months of fighting, and the United States did not witness a lot of casualties. So it was the Splendid Little War. So the Treaty of Paris, I just said before how I had to tell you what this is about. So the Treaty of Paris, right? So now what do we get? Let's think about it. What do you think? So first off, this whole treaty, Americans are still, not all of them are on board, like, hey, we're just going to take everything now? So there's this big discussion of like, well, what do we get? How can we justify getting it? And that kind of thing. So first we decided Cuba would be free. And by free, basically it was a protectorate of the United States. So we protect them. It's basically still kind of a territory, but they are independent, but not really. And so that will be Cuba throughout part of the 20th century until basically they take over completely, gain their independence under a communist government. But that's, super long away. Until now, yeah, basically they're free. And so that's how that works. Guam, it's a little island, and I'll show you in a map in a little bit. It's a little island in the South China Sea. So basically, we got that part of our territory. We gained that from Spain. We also gained Puerto Rico, a part of Spain that was in the agreement. They gave that to us as well. And we talk about Puerto Rico. There are parts of Puerto Rico where you can only fill out an absentee ballot, I believe, or I think it's the other way around. But yeah, there's still a territory of the United States even today. So we gained that territory, and it kind of still remains a territory, even though the people of Puerto Rico, some of them really want a entrance into the United States, become an official state, but has yet to happen. The Philippines. So what we do is we actually buy the Philippines for $20 million, which is insane. Remember, they wanted independence, and we're like, oh yeah, you'll get it. But we have to teach you and stuff. So here you go, and they buy it from Spain for $20 million. It's actually funny. In your textbook, it's in there. McKinley said the reason why he decided to go forward and acquire Spain is because he talked to a bunch of Methodist clergymen, and they said the best way to go forward is to educate them on religion, educate the Filipinos on American society, American ways, and therefore he should do it, even though he kind of left out the fact or misremembered or something that most of the Filipinos were not Methodist. So, just kind of this justifications for justifying why we're taking these places and why they're becoming territories. And here's the last part of it, is just a little map of the Philippines and Guam and Cuba and Puerto Rico. And so this is kind of the scope of what we've acquired. Remember, now we have Alaska, we have Hawaii, and all these new places. So the United States has become an imperial power. Let me know if you have any more questions about any activities you're doing, any worksheets that may go along with this. And yeah, hope you guys are doing good and staying safe. Goodbye.